So my name is Gina, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Liver Education Advocates. We are a nonprofit organization, and you'll actually hear from my dad in a little bit here. My dad actually founded our organization just a little over 7 years, or in September it'll be 7 years since he founded our organization. He founded our organization 6 months after he had a liver transplant. Our former name was NASH Knowledge, which, and Mike shared a little bit about the disease name, but we are the only patient advocacy group that was actually founded by a liver cancer survivor and a liver transplant survivor. So we work very closely with a lot of different patient advocacy groups, such as the Fatty Liver Alliance and Mike and his team. But we're the only ones that were actually founded by somebody who's gone through all of the disease states. So that my dad's experience is what really caused us to found the organization. My background was actually in marketing and communications. I worked in corporate America, and just the timing of everything works out, and I stepped in to really lead the organization forward. Our mission at Liver Education Advocates is to ultimately help reduce the need for liver transplants. And we do this by increasing awareness and providing education about liver health, but specifically about fatty liver disease, which, as you all probably know, is a growing health epidemic. So hopefully you all know a lot about the liver, but the liver is actually on the right-hand side of your body, just under your rib cage. It is actually the largest internal organ in our body, and it weighs about 3 pounds. It's about the size of an American football. The liver is an amazing organ because it is the only organ that actually can regenerate itself. And it also can, once you get damage up to a certain point, you can actually reverse the damage. So it's such an amazing organ as you actually start to learn about it. And the good news here is all of you obviously have some interest in fatty liver, whether you have fatty liver disease, know somebody that does, or you just wanted to learn more. The amazing thing about the liver is with fatty liver disease, up until a certain point of the disease scarring, you can actually reverse the damage that may be done to your liver through lifestyle changes, which we'll talk about a little bit here. And the liver does have over 500 functions for the body. The biggest thing that the liver does is it actually helps detoxify any chemicals, any environmental things, food, anything that should not kind of be in your body. The liver actually helps detoxify that. I always say there's so many different detoxify products, these detox products and things like that. And what I always like to say is your liver is actually the ultimate natural detoxifier. So you don't need these cleanses and all of that. If you really start eating healthy and doing all these lifestyle choices, your liver is actually the ultimate detoxifier for your body. So fatty liver disease is sadly on the rise. 100 million Americans actually have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And what fatty liver disease is, in the most basic sense, is it's basically fat buildup in the liver. You start to get inflammation, there's liver dysfunction, you can get fibrosis and ultimately cirrhosis, which you can see there, the healthy liver versus a fatty liver. And the model Mike's gonna show at the end here is fabulous. Most people who have fatty liver disease actually do not know that they have it. So it's fabulous that all of you are here today. For those of you that were able to get scanned also, it's great because there's some studies that show that 90% of people that actually have fatty liver disease do not even know that they have it. So when we think about fatty liver disease progression, this chart here shows, normal liver versus fatty liver. And fatty liver is basically when you, again, have too much fat buildup in your liver. And, it's like more than 10% of your liver is fat. The old terminology was NAFLD, and now it's MASLD when we start talking about fatty liver. Then as you continue to get fat buildup in the liver, your liver will start to swell. It can cause damage to your liver tissues, and that is what's called, in this third one here, NASH, or it's now called MASH, which is metabolic associated steatohepatitis. And then as we continue on, over time that scar tissue can really develop, and it will start to replace healthy tissue. And that's when you start to get into deeper scarring and could even start to get cirrhosis. And as you start to get cirrhosis, that really affects the liver's ability to function over time. Cirrhosis can also lead to liver cancer. And once you hit that cirrhosis point and likely have liver cancer, many times the only option is a transplant. And again, you'll hear from my dad's story, so I'm not going to steal his thunder here. So he'll talk about his own personal experience, but that is what happened to my dad, is he got to a point where he was told, if you don't have a transplant, you're going to die. So we talked a little bit about the change of the disease name. So some of these multinational liver societies that, went through a lot of process and determined that we were no longer going to call this disease non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which was NASH. And we changed to the term that includes metabolic. And the reason for that is this disease at its core is tied to metabolic dysfunction and metabolic disease. And when you think about metabolic diseases, you think about type 2 diabetes, you think about obesity, you think about all these diseases that are really deeply rooted, from metabolic syndrome, and fatty liver disease is no different. So there was a lot of work that went into this and the change, and there was a lot of controversy around the change as well, but ultimately the decision was made, let's change the name of this disease. And you can even see on the bottom here, if you can read that, it's kind of small, we have some information about the old terms to the new terms, but basically that term non-alcoholic in most cases was changed to metabolic. So some startling liver facts. A lot of people are very surprised to know that non-alcoholic liver disease is now actually surpassing alcohol-associated liver disease. Our organization, we do a lot. We go out into the community. We go to community events. We go to health fairs. We set up a table, like if you probably saw our table out there. We're usually at the table talking to people. And so many people say, I have fatty liver disease, but I never drank. Or I only drank a tiny bit, like I have no idea how I got this. Or, my loved one got cirrhosis of the liver and they never even drank alcohol. And we're seeing that continuing to rise. And I'm going to talk about our food system and the food, but that really is a huge piece of this disease. Non-alcoholic liver disease is also the leading cause for liver transplants. And liver cancer is actually the fastest growing and the deadliest cancer. And we're seeing those numbers continue to rise. A lot of folks are calling fatty liver disease the next public health crisis because we're seeing the disease continue to rise at astounding rates. I already mentioned that 100 million Americans have fatty liver. Of that, about approximately 25% of those will end up getting the more progressed form of MASH or NASH, as you may have heard it called. And what's really shocking to me as a mother of 2 teenage kids is that we are now seeing the disease rise at startling rates at kids at younger and younger rates. Some studies show that 10% of kids under the age of 15 have fatty liver disease, and 18% of kids ages 15 to 19 have fatty liver disease. This is a disease that you never would have even seen in kids before. This is a disease that historically was called a drinker's disease, and now we're seeing it rise within kids. And then also, our organization, we do a lot within the Hispanic and the Latino community as well. Everything we do is in English and in Spanish because we're seeing a huge rise of the disease within the Hispanic community. Nearly half of Hispanics or Latinos that live in the United States actually have fatty liver disease. So when we talk about the Latino community, I just think it's important to note that part of the reason there is also a genetic factor. And there's a lot more work and research being done around the genetics around this disease as well. But when we see the rise of fatty liver disease within the Latino community, it is the 7th leading cause of death in the Latino community and the 4th leading cause among males 55 to 64. And we look at, a lot of times these studies kind of group this community all in one, but we really see the highest rates in Mexicans within that community as well. And we also see higher rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity, which again are risk factors for fatty liver disease. And this just shows about the genetic piece that I mentioned. So there is a specific gene within that community that's called the PNPLA3 gene. And that is why we're seeing such a huge rise within that community. And there's some studies going on too to really look at other genetic factors as well, not just within the Latino and Hispanic community, but others as well. And then I talked about kids as well. One of the things that we're also seeing within children is what's called lean NASH or lean MASH or lean fatty liver disease. So you can be super skinny and still have fatty liver disease. And that is a misconception for a lot of people, that they think, oh, if I'm not overweight, I can never have fatty liver disease. And that is not true at all, because it's all about what you're putting in your body for the most part. Again, there's genetic factors as well. So, you could eat a very high added sugar content diet and be very thin, but still have fatty liver disease. And one of the most astounding things is that added sugar, which is actually fructose, is actually metabolized by your liver the exact same way as alcohol. So I want to repeat that. Added sugar, if you look at food labels and you see the sugar content, and then you look at this added sugar is metabolized by your liver the exact same way as alcohol. So if you pause and think about that, of why we're seeing such high rates, and especially in kids, and I'll get into some examples, but a bottle of Gatorade, for example, that I see at so many sporting events, has 34 grams of added sugar in one bottle. Kids and adult females should have no more than 24 grams of added sugar in an entire day. And adult men should have no more than 34 grams of added sugar in an entire day. So I just use that as one example to really think about how quickly you can have all that added sugar and how it can be metabolized by your liver, and why we're seeing the rise of this disease. So what are the symptoms? That's always a question that we get asked, or what are the symptoms of fatty liver disease? Fatty liver disease is mostly a silent disease. However, we do see some people that experience some symptoms, and as the disease progresses, you may start to see some symptoms. So abdominal pain, easy bruising, weight loss, excessive fatigue, dark urine, loss of appetite, nausea, pale stools, and then I think the obvious one is jaundice as well, that a lot of people are aware. That's the yellowing, of the skin and of the eyes. And then what are the risk factors? So we talked about this a little bit, but being overweight or obese, having type 2 diabetes, and then we talked also about metabolic syndrome. So some of this, the pieces of metabolic syndrome are abdominal fat, high blood pressure, elevated sugar levels, and abnormal cholesterol. Also, Michael talked about heart disease, sleep apnea. Insulin resistance also is really closely connected and tied to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That is part of the metabolic syndrome, and we're starting to hear more and more about insulin resistance and the impact of that on our bodies. And then other factors, again, are genetics and things like that. So as we think about our diet, you think about carbohydrates and you think about sugars and starches. So you have sugar, which actually breaks down into fructose, into glucose molecules. And then you have starches such as your breads and your pastas, and these break down into multiple glucose molecules as well. So it's really important to start thinking about, a lot of times people just think about sugar, and they think about the impact of sugar on their diet, but they're not thinking about these starches. So white breads, white pastas, and what those actually do is they get into your body, they break into glucose, which is basically sugar. So it's important to think about that as you're really thinking about your health also. So I think we all know what sugar is. There's a lot of different names for sugar as well. So this is kind of like the basic dictionary description of what sugar actually is. But the thing to remember is, again, when I said 24 grams of sugar, 24 grams of sugar is 6 tablespoons. I use the grams amount because when you actually look at labels, that's what it has. It tells you in grams, but it's 6 grams of sugar. One of the things, too, to really recognize is that sugar is highly addictive. And I like to share that. I speak a lot in front of children. We go and do a lot in schools and speak to kids a lot. And I always like to tell kids, if you're addicted to sugar, it's not your fault. The food industry has literally manufactured and kind of processed all of their foods to get us addicted so that we want more and more. And I could go on for days. Mike will probably cut me off here if I talk too long, but when you go back to the 1980s, there was this huge push and this huge movement to take fats out of foods. This huge push, fats bad, fats bad. So what did they do? They took fat out of food, and what they did is they replaced it with added sugar so that it still would taste good. And we are now seeing that a lot of those studies were funded by the sugar industry, and they were not actually accurate because there's good fats and there's bad fats. And they took good fats out of a lot of foods, and they replaced them with added sugar. And you can really correlate the high rise of obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease back to that change in the food. And now so much food these days is processed and it has so much added sugar in it. The other thing too that's really important, and one of the things I want to hit on is sugar sweetened beverages. So we are seeing a huge rise of what we call liquid sugar as well. And liquid sugar does not fill you up. It doesn't satiate you. And basically, you can get, my example with the Gatorade, an entire day's worth of sugar or more than you should have just in one drink. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't eat that much sugar. And when you start to really think about it, there is so much hidden sugars in a lot of things. So ketchup, for example. 1 tablespoon of ketchup has 4 grams of added sugar. So I don't know about you, but if I have ketchup, I'm not using just like 1 little tablespoon. I'm probably using at least 3, which is then half of my added sugar that I should have in a day, just in ketchup. Think about salad dressings. A lot of these canned fruits have they're loaded with added sugars in them. So my message that I share a lot is it's not that you need to really cut everything out and go extreme, like Mike said, it's about little baby steps, but just being aware, starting to read labels, starting to really understand what is in these foods, because a lot of times the front of the package will promote it as healthy, but when you actually turn it around and read that nutrition label, you'll see that a lot of the foods that are promoted as healthy actually have a lot of hidden sugars in them. And then my favorite, because a lot of people these days drink all of these frappuccinos and the Starbucks and the Dunkin' Donuts drinks, all these like different coffee drinks that are really desserts. So this is one of my favorite. This is like a Dunkin' Donuts pumpkin swirl frozen coffee. It is 183 grams of sugar, which is basically the same as eating 17 donuts.
Oh, dear.
Yes, and I see all the time, especially in the fall time, people walking around with these, like it's nothing. So this is, again, just like another example. I know for me, like I'm always like, oh, well, soda's not good for you. Soda's not good for you. Well, like Gatorade is pretty much has just as much sugar. So again, it comes down to like some of the marketing with this. And for kids, we like to compare how many chocolate chips you would have to eat to equal your favorite drink. So it's just, again, for an awareness sake. But the good news, as I mentioned, fatty liver disease can be reversed naturally as long as the scarring is not too far. Once you hit that fibrosis, once you hit a significant scarring, at that point, you're going to need medication. You might end up eventually needing a liver transplant. But when you're in those early stages, you can reverse fatty liver disease through diet and exercise. So I know Mike hit a little bit about exercise and weight training. It's really anything that's resistance training is good for you. Sometimes it's those bands, different things like that. But being able to reduce the amount of sugar in your diet, trying to eat more whole grains, eating more fruits and vegetables. I mean, it's all of these things. A lot of people talk about the Mediterranean diet, but we always like to say, eat less crap and eat more food. So crap, carbonated drinks, refined sugar, artificial sweeteners and colors, processed foods, and then foods, fruits and vegetables, organic lean proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, and drink water. I tell my kids all the time that if you drink water 95% of the time, you don't even realize how big of a difference that makes. Because again, it goes back to how much liquid sugar that we end up getting in our bodies. And then, the great news is it's been a little over a year ago now that we finally got our first medical treatment on the market, which is Rezdiffra. And that does treat people in stages F2 to F3 fibrosis. But it is important to note that this is in collaboration with lifestyle changes. So I'm sure one of us can talk to you a little bit more if you have questions about that. But until a little over a year ago, there was absolutely no medication on the market for fatty liver disease, and we're going to continue to see more and more. So a lot of you, I know, got your liver scan. Some of the simple risk assessment, and I know the screen's cut off, but there's 4 simple questions that a lot of times you can ask to see if you're at risk. And then if you do have those, we always recommend a FIB-4 calculator, which we have materials on our table out there about this. And then after FIB-4, if you're still at high risk, then there's a lot of non-invasive testing. So the Hepatis with Mindray and Agau, that many of you got scanned, that's an example of a non-invasive test that can really show within scarring or fat within your liver. And then at Liver Education Advocates too, we do have a virtual-based liver disease support group. It's actually run by my mom, who was my dad's caregiver, and a patient who works for us. It's actually a patient who reversed her liver disease through diet and exercise. So they really both have that firsthand experience. And a lot of times people just find it helpful to come and talk to one another, because a lot of times when you get that diagnosis or you're caring for somebody that has that diagnosis, it can be really stressful, and there's this whole mental health aspect. So sometimes it's just helpful to be able to talk to somebody else who's going through something like that. We also have a documentary, a 27-minute documentary that's on our website that shows my dad's journey and the journey of some others.